Well, Brian, I don't know how much you know about his histories. From what I know, from what he shared with me, Brian came up in a not that Brian didn't, but Brian, I'll just say he exuded, the spirit of a working man.
Mm.
And he came up out of Newcastle, England, where his dad was a coal miner, and he grew up playing out in the streets of the cobblestone streets, and the whistle would blow, and and the kids would hear the whistle blow and know they had about 15 minutes before the miners would come marching down the streets. And when they heard the taps, back then the miners would wear little metal taps under their shoes to keep from wearing the leather out on their shoes.
Mm.
So they would put metal taps on the bottoms of their shoes so that they could, get as much life out of the shoe as they could. So when the kids heard the whistle blew, they knew they had a few minutes. And then when they heard the taps tick in, on the clicking on the cobblestones, they knew it was time to march into the house and be ready for the dad to get a bath and then them to eat a family dinner. So but he grew up in a very blue collar world, and Brian had some success with Jordy, and he had worked his ass off with that. From the story that I know from him, that he'd worked his ass off with Jordy, and they were a very respected band in several territories and such, but it hadn't really ever broke internationally or anything. And then he had the responsibility of family and that kind of thing. So at a certain point, I think he felt like he needed to get a real job,
Right.
and be a responsible father, which is a lot. I can relate to that because I found myself in the same situation prior to things breaking for me. And then the story goes that I know that got a phone call from his agent trying to get him to, after he had walked away from playing, and got a phone call from his agent trying to get him to come down and audition for this band ACDC that needed a new singer. And he shunned it off. And I guess he had been asked a couple of times to go down to London and do the audition, and he kind of blew it off. And then he got an offer to go down and sing a Hoover vacuum cleaner commercial.
Yeah, that came up on YouTube not too long ago. Like that, actually, I don't know if you heard it, but it's on there now, which is it's crazy, man. It's him. It's undeniably him. You hear,
Hoover. But yeah, so he thought he'd go down and pick up a few dollars to sing that commercial, and his agent said, "Well, while you're down there, go have a sing with the guys in ACDC." So he went over but he didn't really know any of their songs, I don't think. From what he shared about, I think that they mainly ended up jamming on Nutbush City Limits.
Yeah.
And then I guess they played that 2 or 3 times, and then he went on back home and didn't really know what was up. And they started calling him and having conversations. And then after a certain period of time, I think he ended up just having to ask Malcolm, "Are you asking me to be in the band?" And I don't know if you ever talked to Malcolm or Angus, but they're like talking to 2 little Tasmanian devils.
Yeah, right.
Brian does a good imitation of them. But so anyway, so I think as far as to answer your question, I think he just brings a very honest, blue collar spirit, to everything that he sings. And he's just he's a guy that I think, because of that near miss to where he was facing maybe not playing anymore. I think and I say that again because I know I was in that same situation. I found out I was going to be a dad. I came off the road. That's why I so can identify with his story, because I I didn't think I'd be playing either. And then, but it comes to find out that, that's actually what resulted in the opportunity for me to go to have the success I had. And Brian was pretty much that. So I think, again, I think you can see it in him that he doesn't take it for granted. He, every single show is very important to him because I think he was that close to maybe not performing. And not only did he have another life, of being in a successful band, it was the most successful band,
right,
in rock and roll. So I think that's what he brings alongside his barbed wire vocal cords and that he just got an infectious smile and just I think he embodies the spirit of what people want an ACDC song to be.
Mhm. Do you think his voice helped the band reach kind of a higher commercial potential? I mean, you heard kind of preceding that, you know, with Bon Scott, especially in the United States, they weren't so sure about his voice and how it was going to kind of translate to a wider audience and into radio. But do you think Brian kind of helped them sort of get over that kind of commercial hump?
Absolutely. I mean, it was all a moment in time. I mean, you got to add the sum of everything to.
Mhm.
You have to add the sum of everything to get to that answer. It wasn't, you know, there's things that Bon could sing that Brian couldn't, and there's obviously things that Brian can sing that Bon couldn't.
Mhm.
Brian's range is incredible. I mean, Bon was the cool thing about Bon was he had such a diabolical, you know, sound to his voice that also matched his lifestyle, which ultimately led to his, you know, his passing. And again, it was a moment in time that the table was set for, you know, a band that exuded the ultimate in rock and roll lifestyle that it was so extreme it resulted in one of the band members, you know, passing away. And then so you got that moment in time. Then you got somebody coming in with a range like Brian, you know, with some of those high end parts that he hits on Back in Black and stuff. I mean, you know, you got to have a pair of balls between your legs to reach, you know, what he was able to do. And then just the overall, I'll use the word desperation that the band had, that it had to step up. It was a prove it or lose it moment for them to step up. So that added to that moment in time. And then probably the other biggest ingredient with all of that combined is a guy named Mutt Lange.
Mhm.
That when you look at his resume of what he does, I mean, you mention Mutt Lange's name to any vocalist, and they immediately start sweating.
Right.
And I mean, you know, so I don't think that you can not taking anything away from the band or from that moment in time of losing a singer and the desperation that they had to be able to prove themselves or Brian's voice and range and all that kind of stuff, not taking anything away from any of that.
Mhm.
But you can't deny that, you know, had it not been for Mutt Lange, that record, you know, the records Mutt Lange makes with anybody is just, I mean, the guy is a son of a bitch. I mean, he is incredible.
Yeah, he definitely got something out of Brian. I mean, he gets something out of everybody that he works with, obviously.
Oh,
But
you know, if you could take and make Shania Twain the top selling artist in country women out of all country women ever or whatever, you know, based on her belly button and him producing. I mean, if you can do that, you know, that I think Mutt Lange could take a tree out in the yard and make a hit out of it. I mean, the guy's proven. I mean, you give him somebody like Brian Johnson and ACDC and let him do his thing, and it's look the hell out. You know, I mean, it was obviously a winning combination.
Mhm. You know, kind of fast forwarding, you know, I want to talk about the song "Locked and Loaded." How did that kind of come about? I mean, I know a little bit of the history of it. I mean, Brian was a Jackyl fan, right? And that's kind of and then he got in touch with you guys. Is that kind of how it started?
The first Jackyl album broke, and we were playing. At that point, we were playing, you know, smaller rooms and such. But the band had broken to where we were supposed to be. Most of the promoters were putting us into bigger rooms, theaters and such.
Hmm.
But there were still some promoters that wanted to hold us to the contracts for the places that we had been booked in prior to the record exploding.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a place down in Florida, and the promoter decided not to put us in a bigger room, and he wanted us to play multiple nights at his smaller venue, you know, like 1,000-seat place or something, instead of moving to the theater.
Mm.
And so the schedule didn't provide for it. We just had that one night, which meant it was a really hard ticket for people to get into.
Mm.
And I got a phone call from another agent friend of mine that said, "Hey, Brian Johnson's wife is wanting, she wants to come out and see you guys play. So I got a chance to meet her first, and she said that it was very flattering, because she said Brian is a huge fan of you guys, and and I thought, well, it was really nice and flattering, and because she came out with some friends, and she was he wanted to come to the show tonight, but he had to be he was doing something else, but I thought it was really nice that she said that. And then it was probably a couple of months later that friend reached out and said, hey, Brenda was wanting to reach out to you to see if you wanted to participate in an event that I'm trying to remember everything that happened, but she said, he said, Brenda wants to reach out to you about inviting you to an event she's got going on. And can I give you your number? I said, yes. And she said, Brian and I are putting together a benefit they live down there. The Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus used to be based out of that part of Florida. Mm. So the whole town used to be buildings that Ringling Brothers built down there. So they all look kind of circus-esque with some of the design and stuff. It's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. But the community's taken over all those buildings and such now for the most part. And there's one beautiful theater that they were looking at renovating. And so I was invited to come down and sing a couple of songs with an all-star band. So it was the guy that was Tina Turner's band leader. And I mean, there's just a lot of people there. Duck Dunn from Booker T and the MGs, and the blues. He was in the Blues Brothers. The guy with the pipe, and the bass player. So just all these incredible people that were there as part of this jam, and so I went down, and that's the first time I actually met Brian, and we did stuff like Ray Charles' version of see the girl with the red dress on, she can shake it baby all night long. Oh yeah, tell me what I say, I guess, and stuff, just old classics. And we just did a lot of fun stuff, and it was an honor to meet everybody. And I actually met Cliff Williams was there as well. Mm. And we had a blast. And then Brian made the offer, sometime we should get together and maybe write some songs. And I was like, okay, great. And we traded numbers and information and stuff. But when I went back home, I wasn't ever going to be that guy to call Brian and go, hey, you said we could write songs. I just kind of let it go, and because I just wasn't going to be that guy. And then Christmas time rolls around, and I got a really beautiful card from them that said, we've never heard from you. We'd still love to get together. Give us a call whenever you think you've got time. We'd love, So after I got that card, again, invite me to give them a call to figure out when to get together. Mm. I called him up, and he goes, hey, why don't you just come on down here, get down here, and let's work on something. So I flew into his house, and flew down to Florida, and we had a chance to hang out for a bit. Got a lot of funny stories about being down there around the first time with him, because I always grew up a big fan, But anyways, we went down his house, and we ended up. He told me I didn't need to bring a guitar. He had plenty of guitars. He said, he goes, let's go grab a guitar. And we'll go in. He has an English pub in his house. He goes, we'll go in the pub and we'll write something. So we went upstairs, this really nice house, and we go down, and he's opening up doorways, looking into these rooms that I don't think he had ever been in before. And we get all the way down the hallway, and we open up a door, and he went, just in there. There it is. And we walked in, and the room was just full of guitars. And I was like, holy shit. I mean, it's good. They were all vintage, like Stratocasters and stuff. Mm. And so I grabbed one of those. I said, do you play? And I said, what, you got all these guitars? I said, do you play? He goes, no, I just like the way those things look. So his favorite looking guitar is like a Stratocaster. And so we took that downstairs and into the pub, and we wrote parts of Locked and Loaded. It was, and it was funny because, I was thinking I'd be writing music and then, we'd be working on the lyrics and stuff, but there, he could hear stuff in his head that he wanted. And although he doesn't play, he would hum out what he was hearing. Mm. So I'd have to sit there and figure, I'd have to figure out how to produce the sound that he was singing to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, he was involved in every bit of it, from the music to, but when I left there, we got to drinking and we didn't finish the song.
Mm-hmm.
Or should I say we got to eating. God almighty, the guy, I mean, he's an incredible cook. And I mean, it was just a fun hang. So I came back home and I had those parts, and it was just really killing me that we didn't have a finished song. And Jackyl was about to record our third album, and the Cut the Crap album.
Yeah.
And we were we were in the studio and we were working stuff up, and I still didn't have the song. And I had a lady friend over, and that he'd come to visit when I was single, and it was late at night. And I think I scared the hell out of her because I jumped up, but just all of a sudden I could just hear these parts. And I remember it was the reason I referenced that is because it was such a substantial connecting of the dots that I think I screamed or hell, I think I just obviously blurted out and had excitement with it. So I went running downstairs trying to find a guitar and started putting all the parts together. Mm-hmm. And then the band came in and we were working it up, and I called him and I said, "Hey man, you know that song we were working on?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "We're going to track it." And he goes, "Well, I'll be up tomorrow." Mm-hmm. So then he flew into Atlanta and sat on the steps outside the studio, and we finished up the lyrics. And then, so we were recording the song, and Mike Frazier was engineering. Mm-hmm. Mike's did a lot of legendary stuff, Tamara Smith and Metallica, and he was down here from Canada, and he does all the ACDC stuff. And so Mike comes in and we get it recorded, and I'm standing beside I'm in the control room singing, and Brian's kind of and there's a party going on in the control room. I mean, everybody was up there. It was a party going on, and I'm trying to sing this song, and it's very wordy. What you going to do when the sun don't shine and the moon don't rise up right? It's real wordy. So I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to breathe to be able to sing all these parts without getting winded. And Brian was kind of pacing back and forth, and I'm thinking, man, I must suck, because I could tell he was getting antsy about something. And finally he comes over, he goes, "Give me another microphone." And so Mike Frazier hooked him up a microphone, and he grabbed the lyrics, and he goes, "Okay, you sing this line, I'm singing this line." And so and that's what he had been antsy about, because I guess he was contemplating whether or not he was going to jump in and sing with me. So we ended up having a lot of fun doing that, and everybody was like excited about it, and we were having a good night. And then we all ended up back down at the house, and again the party continued. And the next morning we got up and we walked into the studio, and Frazier was already up in there working. And I said, "What you got going on, Frazier?" And he just stood up and looked at us, and he pressed play and walked away from the console. And all of a sudden I'm hearing mine and Brian's voice just duel it out back and forth. And you can imagine, I mean, I camped out 2 nights to get Back in Black tickets, when that album came out, to be front row of that show. And there he is at the house, and there's, our voices are coming out of these speakers, that the little NS10 studio speakers, and the speakers were coming 5 foot out as much as he had it cranked up, and speakers were jumping out of the box, but it sounded so incredible. And then I got really sad because I didn't figure anybody would ever hear it except for us, And we got through listening to it, and Brian goes, "Well, if you don't mind me, son, I think we should just leave it like that." And I said, "Well, your record company's not going to let you be on our album." Mm-hmm. And he goes, "If they want another ACDC record, they will."
Nice.
So, yeah. So about a week or 2 later, he calls me, goes, "Give Alvin a call." Their manager's named Alvin Handwerker. He said, "Give Alvin a call and sort out the details." And I called Alvin. He goes, "Okay, Jesse, what are y'all doing?" It was a pain in his ass, but next thing you know, we had that track on the record. The rest of that story, I'll go and tell you, that's pretty cool, is the record comes out, and it goes up inside the top 20, the top 10, the top 5. It's just, it's doing really well. And the record companies had lined up a whole day of press, where they do the press junkets, where you just get on a phone call and then they start patching you in all over the world, to all these different people doing interviews. And they had that press junket, they had that thing scheduled for a couple of weeks. And Brian, I was completely blown away that Brian had agreed to do it with us.
Oh, wow.
Because it's the first time anybody in ACDC had ever worked outside their band on a recording like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was excited and surprised that Brian was going to dedicate that time to doing it. And then the day before we did that, they announced that ACDC was going into the Hall of Fame.
Oh, nice.
The Rock and Roll Hall. And I called Brian. I said, Brian, you don't have to do these interviews with me, since all this is going, because it was a big deal, right? And everybody was talking. And he goes, no way, me son. He goes, we're going to do it. Everything's fine. And he's such a humble, sweet guy. I mean, we would get on the interviews and everybody would immediately go to talking about congratulating him and talking to him about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he would respond, but then he would immediately turn it right back to talking about how excited he was to be working on the record together and Locked and Loaded. And so it's pretty cool. I mean, he's everything you'd want the lead singer of AC/DC to be.
That's awesome, man. And I know you worked with them again. You guys wrote "Kill the Sunshine" together. Was that a similar circumstance? Just kind of hanging out and trading riffs back and forth. I mean, I know he wasn't on that one. He didn't sing on the actual track, but as far as the co-write went, how'd that all kind of come about?
He came back up and we had another writing session and just he and I, and we were in the studio and he was smoking these hand rolled black tobacco cigarettes that he smokes, and he was drinking his warm green beer, and I had the drum machine going with speakers. Again, they were bouncing out of the cabinets. I had them cranked up, and I'm looping the riff for "Kill the Sunshine," and it's very much an AC/DC sounding song. It was so much like AC/DC. I'd never done anything with it because it was just too close to them, but I thought with writing it with him would give me an excuse to get away with it. Mm-hmm. And he immediately jumped on it, and we were looping it around and around, and he was scatting on it, just, not really even singing words, just kind of finding some melody and just kind of mumbling through, at the top of his lungs, and we were recording it all. And we looped it for 15 minutes with him scatting around. But there were certain parts that we would get to. He would say, "You are my sunshine." and he was singing, "You are my sunshine." And so we get through looping that around for about 15 minutes. And he goes, "Well, give it a playback and let's see what we've got." So we're just listening for some of the melody ideas and kind of seeing where it was all going. And I was going to different parts of the song and different riffs and stuff. And every time it would get to that part, "You are my sunshine." And I'm thinking to myself, I love Brian, and this is incredible, and I'm proud of it, but how do I tell him I don't want to sing "You Are My Sunshine"? And we listened to it, and he sat there, and he was in deep thought for a minute, and I wasn't saying nothing. And he goes, "I think we're on to something." And I went, "Yeah," and I'm sitting there still sweating because I didn't want to be the one that tells him I didn't want to sing "You Are My Sunshine." And he goes, "But we're going to have to change that lyric." He said, "They'll think you're a bit of a puff if you're singing." So he said, we'll have to sing. He goes, "I know. We'll kill the sunshine," and then the whole song kind of grew out of him flipping that. So now I know we'll kill the sunshine because I'm the king of the nighttime. And he was like, he thought that was great, and I did too. And so we ended up with that song. And then, but it was sometime later when we cut the track. I mean, the band wasn't in the studio at that time. Mm-hmm. So when we got to recording it again, we ended up cutting that track. And it's one of my favorites. I mean, I've always loved it. So again, I could have never gotten away with doing that because it's just such a blatant AC/DC sounding type song. But we did it, and very proud of that. And he's a competitive guy. I mean, he takes everything he does very, very serious. Wants it to be right and good. I mean, whether it be songwriting or racing cars, and he races up here at Road Atlanta. Mm-hmm. We go up there. And first time I ever went to watch him race, it had rained and he didn't have any rain tires, and he was in an old Lotus race car, vintage Lotus race car. Mm. And we're sitting there watching race, and he comes around this turn, goes straight off the road and head in straight into a concrete wall.
No, jeez.
And the car flips up on its side. And I thought, oh my God, I've just watched the lead singer of ACDC die. And I mean, his arms were limp. I mean, the car was sideways and he was strapped into it. And then all of a sudden he kind of jerked and came to, and then he undoes his seatbelt, falls to the bottom of the car, which was the passenger side, because it was up on its passenger. And then he came and crawled out the top, and we were all worried about trying to see if he was hurt, or, you know, he kind of walked right past us straight over to, I brought an entire pig we had barbecued, like the whole head and everything. He walked right past us straight over into the little camp that we had set up and started eating barbecue. It was funny. But that car was all kind of messed up. He's a tough son of a bitch.
What do you, taking back, you talked about camping out for Back in Black tickets. What was your impression the first time you heard, you know, Hell's Bells, the first time Brian's voice kind of comes into it? I mean, do you remember that? Do you remember that moment?
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you a story to that fact. I mean, I'll lead up to this, that answer by telling you this, that plaque right there, that's up on the wall, that center one, was a plaque that was, that's Jesse, you can say it to Jesse. That was given to me after the first album came out. I think they gave it to me in 94 or 95, I guess it was somewhere. And, but we were the most played band on XTV down in Tampa, Florida. And I called Brian because I was out on tour. We were out with Aerosmith, and they'd call me and they wanted me to make an appearance at that festival, about 40,000 people in Tampa. And I called Brian. I said, hey, I got to come into Florida to go to this festival. Do you want to roll up there with me? I'm not going to be there the whole day. And he said, sure. So I flew in. I went down to his house and spent the night before. And then the next morning we got up and he had a brand new Aston Martin, beautiful car. And he wanted to take the Aston Martin because he hadn't had a chance to really drive it yet. So and I remember I opened up the door to that Aston Martin and I got the leather smell just knocked me down. I mean, it was beautiful car, smelled incredible. So we got in the car and he did about 140 miles an hour all the way up to that festival. We got there in no time at all, but we spent a good bit of the day up there, and they presented me with that plaque, and we had a good time. It was a great day. And then it was starting. The bands were still playing because I wasn't playing. We just went up to be presented the plaque. And the bands were still playing stuff, and he looks over and he goes, I'm getting a little bit, tired of being. He goes, why don't we just head on back to the house and go get some dinner? So I said, sure. So we went out and he parked that Aston Martin out backstage, kind of across this little field section where the festival was. And we make our way over to the car, and we just get into the car, and these two fans come running across the field, and one of them's got a Back in Black CD. And Brian rolls his window down and goes, hey man, would you please sign, my Back in Black CD? And Brian goes, sure, that guy. And he signs it, and he goes, you should get Jesse to sign it too. I mean, Brian's just always a gentleman, and he wants me to sign a Back in Black CD for, of course the guys they were pumped up about, getting to hang and talk to us and stuff, and especially Brian. And then they grab their CD and they take off. And it was just me and Brian. We're just sitting in that car, and the concert's going on out in the distance. And he just sits there and he kind of looks forward for a minute, didn't really say anything. And he said, I've never understood that. And I said, what's that? He said, the people wanting the signatures. Mm-hmm. He says, a fascinating thing that people want to collect your signature. And I said, well, maybe for me, it's, it wouldn't, why would they want, just certain people? I said, but, I said, that's Back in Black. I said, there's things that people remember, Brian. They remember that where they were when Elvis died. Mm-hmm. They remember what it was like, when the first man landed on the moon. And they remember where they were the first time they heard Back in Black. and that's truly the level of of where that album sets. Where were you when
Yeah.
Elvis died? Where were you when we landed on the moon? Where were you when you heard Back in Black? People can generally tell you those things, right? And I said, so, when I gave him that comparison, he sat there and thought about it in a minute and went, ah, and just kind of shrugged it off. And then we left and went down the road. But it just to that point, you know, I was in Roanoke, Virginia, playing in a cover band, and the guy, you know, I think the guy played right after a Human League song or something. He played a new ACDC song and just blew the doors off the place.
Mm.
It was in between. We were playing like 3 1-hour sets a night. It was like in between one of those sets that I heard it, and of course it stuck with me forever.
Nice, man. Are there other so some of your other favorite Brian fronted ACDC albums? Are there any other ones that you have kind of a soft spot for?
You know, Back in Black is the pinnacle, and then For Those About to Rock was another Mutt Lange, you know, masterpiece with, you know, with what they did with that production. Yeah, and I've become a more so after getting away from it and going back to it. I'm more, you know, I'm a fan of that Black Ice album. You know, that's a good album. It's a great album.
To tell you what, just you know, one more quick question here for you, Jesse, and then I'll let you go. And again, man, I really appreciate your time and the stories. You know, talk a little bit too, as a singer yourself for so many years, kind of Brian's voice over the years. I mean, obviously he starts with Mutt Lange, and he's way super high, and then obviously, you know, through time and all the touring and everything else, you know, I mean, his voice has kind of evolved over the years. It got a little more aggressive through the '80s, and then even into like Razor's Edge and stuff. And that's almost kind of come full circle back with the new record, where it's a little bit more. He's still got those highs, but it's not as, I guess it's not as harsh anymore, you know, like it's not as, I guess, you know, sometimes on some of like the Razor's Edge records, like, you know, with like Thunderstruck, I mean, it sounds like he's gonna blow a nut. He's singing so hard there, you know. But
he's still totally capable of doing every bit of that. I think what you see in that is, you know, is again, I mean, that's the difference in producers too. I mean, Mutt Lange, it's not just Mutt Lange. I mean, there's certain producers that he gets. I mean, I'll give you the case in point is like Sammy Hagar with on that Van Halen record, the one that Mick Jones produced his vocals.
Right.
He's never sang like that before, and he won't ever sing like that again unless somebody gets a hold of him and you know, and challenges him or has ideas about, you know, where things can go from a listener's perspective. You know, I mean, there's an art to being able to, you know, to compile those performances and such. Mm-hmm. So I think, you know, what you're getting out of Brian is a very natural, raw, instinctive, blues-based, you know, rock performance. Mm-hmm. But again, I think my point is he could still hit everything he's ever hit. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, he still can do it. I mean, when he set the studio with us, and there's a line, you know, the knife won't cut and the blood won't flow, and then another line that's what you gonna do when your high horse dies. Mm. There's a couple of those lines in Locked and Loaded that, I mean, when he wrenches down on it, I mean, it'll peel the paint off. I mean, he's got it, and he can still do it. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Especially if you challenge him, he's a competitive guy. He won't be outdone. So there's no doubt in my mind he hasn't lost anything. It's just, I think it's just more so a moment in time of who you're working with and where they're pushing you to go. I mean, Mutt Lange is just a different producer than Brendan is a guy that's conducive to letting it rock. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, that's what Brendan does. He captures great performances of what you are and what you do. You know, mm-hmm. He's not that much of a manipulator that Mutt is in regards to strategically building those mm-hmm. productions. Mm-hmm. So there's no right or wrong. I'm just saying that, but what you're talking about is nothing to do with whether Brian can do it or not. It's mm-hmm. just what he's allowed to get away with, or you know, depending on who's pushing the buttons.
Right. Is Brian the guy that you get compared to kind of the most vocally over the years? I mean, I was really cool when you guys did Locked and Loaded together because you could hear the difference, you know, like there was, but you both kind of sing in a similar register when you really kind of, like you said, when we really kind of wrench down on it.
Well, you just you just said the answer, because that's the way I respond to people is, you know, in Locked and Loaded, you know, I get compared to him a lot because of the raspy vocal style, but on Locked and Loaded, you can hear just how much we sound different, you know. So, but I mean, we both sing in a powered up fashion, and it's an honor to be compared to such. But you know, but again, there's only one Brian Johnson.